All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another community conversation. This is sponsored by the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign-Siebel Center for Design. My name is Brandon Middleton, and I'm really excited to moderate a conversation with two special guests today. Just a little bit of a background about the Intro to Social Design, the class that we're teaching. It's all about social impact and an introduction to the great work that organizations and community groups are doing, and then intersecting that with design and human-centered design and design thinking. So those two concepts mashed in one for design students and community members that are interested in the topic. So this is week number 12 and community conversation number 11. Quick agenda, we'll do a little bit of an overview, introduce our special guests for today. We got two amazing UIUC alums with us. And then for the lion's share of the chat, we'll probably just go back and forth and do some Q&A, share some stories, some insights, some leadership lessons, and we'll get you out of here in about an hour or so. So without further ado, I'll extend my intro and just give you three pictures. But before I do that, again, as we always say, if you have questions or commentary, feel free to use the chat feature in order to put that in there, and throughout the course of the conversation, we'll weave it in. And yeah, we'll keep it conversational and as a dialogue and not a monologue here, okay? So I exist as three different Brandons. Professional Brandon works at Amazon Web Services. Have you heard of cloud computing or any of that stuff? That's what I do by day, in addition to teaching at the design school here at UIUC. In the middle, you see I'm a dad. Underneath my household, there's never a dull moment, always an adventure there. And then community Brandon, focused on social impact work and community organizing here in the Bay Area and broader Chicagoland area where I'm from. It's a big passion of mine as well. So I'm gonna hand the microphone over to Bert, my co-instructor as well. Bert, popcorn over to you, man.
Yeah, glad to be here as always. My name is Bert Strong. I am a lecturer at Siebel Center for Design, where I teach many of the courses there, along with this course that I get to co-teach with Brandon. Some of the things I do related to creative stuff are, I'm an amateur type designer, and also a lot of my background is from interactive arts, such as self-playing pianos. And that's about it for me.
Perfect, thank you, Bert. Let's move forward one slide, and this is literally like one of the biggest reasons why we're here, to kind of surface the work of many of these types of organizations. We've heard from many of them throughout the 12 weeks. We've got about 4 more weeks remaining, but the idea that design thinking and human-centered design should play a part in how you orchestrate programs and give impact back to the community. We've heard from operators of these organizations, and we've got a couple more actually for the next 4 weeks. So I wanted to shout out to anybody that'll be watching this later on that this is a big focus for this particular class. And as designers, we have to get out into the actual communities and talk to the actual people and the folks that will be impacted by the stuff that we're building, processes that we're working on, and you know, the products that we're putting out there. So call out and a shout out to everybody on this slide. And now I'd love to start to hand it over to our special guests. I'll do ladies first, like my mama taught me. We'll do Joe Macarthur, and then we'll do Gregg Zehr. But Joe, like, give us a 2 or 3 minute introduction to yourself. Like, where are you? What are you focused on? What's your tie with the university? I see you got a cool shirt on as well. Just give us a couple minutes of introduction. Right on. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm KellyJo Macarthur. I am in Seattle, Washington today. I also work at Amazon. My job at Amazon is I'm a legal vice president for global media and entertainment. So what that means is the legal teams for Amazon Studios, Prime Video, Amazon Music, Amazon Games, Audible, and I bet you know Twitch report to me. So I work with the lawyers and legal professionals on those teams as well as those businesses. Super, super fun job. I'm from Danville, Illinois, 32 miles east of where probably a lot of you are today if you're in Champaign-Urbana. And I went to Illinois.
Had a wonderful time in Illinois, loved it, couldn't have loved it more. And so I'm super happy to be with you all today and eager to hear what you're anxious to talk about too.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. We'll pass the popcorn over to another phenomenal alum, Greg. Same thing. Give us who you are, what you're focused on, where you are, and then we'll jump into some Q&A after.
Thanks, Brandon. Sure. As Brandon mentioned, my name is Greg Zehr. I'm the president of Lab 126. I started Lab 126 around 18 years ago to help Amazon get into the hardware development business. Amazon realized they wanted to design hardware, and they were transitioning from books or CDs or DVDs and would transition to digital downloads of all of that media, and realized at some point they'd have to be in the hardware business to be successful. So we started Lab 126 with the intention of building devices. The first device we built was Kindle. I built the team that built Kindle. And then more recently, we just launched, my most recent project was called Amazon Astro, which is a little robot for consumers that rolls around your house, gets to know your house, gets to know your family, and can be a little companion for you.
That's amazing. So for all the ECE folks out there, Greg is like who you want to be when you grow up. Like very cool stuff coming out of Lab 126. So another like prompt to queue up the questions that you might have, but I thought it might be cool to double click into 126. I found a video from a couple years ago that I'd put into the queue here. Let's see if I can jump out and make this work.
Well, the very coolest part of my job is getting to see new products go from initial concept, from sketches, all the way through launch. We start off a new project, a new Kindle device starts with sketches and ideas and creative energy is flowing, and then we start to say, what's the physical implementation? What kinds of materials should we use?
The work environment here is very product and customer focused. We are constantly looking for new ideas and new technologies that solve customer problems that we can put into our new devices, or even build a new line of devices that solve customer problems. Recently, I ran the device software team for the Amazon Echo. I listen a lot of NPR. The fact that I can just walk into my room and say, Alexa, play KQED for me, and it starts playing NPR, that's great. The fact that I can ask almost any questions, pretty much it seems that it has the world's knowledge.
About 2 years ago, Amazon introduced the Kindle e-reader in France. And Amazon had bought full-page ads in the French newspapers. I remember my mom sending me one such full-page ad and asking me if I was part of that. And it was a really proud moment because my answer was yes. I was part of bringing this new customer experience to the French customer.
For Lab 126 going forward, when I meet with the engineering teams, I find out they've still got hundreds of ideas for how to make better products, how to make them thinner, lighter, more interesting, more exciting to use.
So Greg, that might take you back down memory lane.
Do you guys see this app right?
A couple of years ago, but I thought that'd be relevant to share in terms of just the culture of building and I saw some oscilloscopes and it reminded me of being in Granger and some of like the old engineering buildings back on campus. So I figured people might get a kick out of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's been quite a ride. That's a little trip down memory lane there. I think KellyJo might have been helping us out around that time. KellyJo was in our helping the devices team, and then she moved on to do what she's doing now.
Well, I have to tell you, I was really especially thankful for my Echo and Alexa during the Illini basketball tournament because I was listening to it on Champaign, and I think WCIA radio in Champaign, like listening to the hometown announcer. So I couldn't get it on TV. And of course, Alexa will solve that problem for me. So thinking of you.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I wanted to have you, KellyJo, reflect on the kind kind of significance of today, since we heard that you are kind of working in the law profession. Today is like a big day and historic day. So maybe just a minute just to give people some thoughts from somebody who works in the field and on the significance of what we just saw in the Supreme Court today.
Yeah, fantastic news today coming out of the Supreme Court. Our first ever female Black justice is amazing, like just groundbreaking, historic day. So as a lawyer, as a woman, as someone who's tries to hire and develop people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and as someone who thinks about solving problems maybe in a different way, but maybe in more similar ways than you might think as designers, thinking about problems from the perspective of many points of view, I just couldn't be happier. It's a super big day. And I think the implications for the country long-term, irrespective of one's politics, are going to be extremely significant. And she's going to be a fantastic role model that will also be a really big deal. So really happy about that today.
Yeah.
That's my news.
We've talked in the class about representation and perspective taking and the importance of kind of diversity of the sample size of the thing that you're creating, whether that be a product or a process or kind of a new methodology for something. So it definitely aligns to a lot of what we've talked about in the first 12 weeks. And yeah, just an exciting day to put a pin in and to remember for generations to come here. So yeah, thanks for the reflection. And maybe if we start off the Q&A with just a little bit of origin stories and how you got started. So KellyJo, I'll start with you in terms of, we've heard that you were born and raised in Danville, but like, how did you find yourself at the university and like into the field that you're in right now? Just a quick kind of the summary origin story.
So as I said, Danville's 32 miles to the east of you. When I was growing up, it was kind of a factory farm town. Most of the factories went away. It was a depressed town when I was a kid growing up. It is a more depressed town today. That often means that in society today, when your economy is in trouble, you bring in industry like prisons and I think soon gambling, and it's been a troubled economy all my life. My parents were teachers, and I had sort of incredible freedom of movement, I would say. I was kind of a free ranger, and that gave me incredible access to people. And my parents worked with extraordinarily diverse populations of people from all over the world. We had a decent number of immigrants coming to Danville as well from all over the world who didn't speak English, many of whom at some point found their way into my home, where my mother would teach them how to speak English and how to be successful in school. So I just had a really wonderful sort of purview into real people, real life, and I think what to value and how to value. And so it was natural. I was going to go to college, and in my hometown, like, you're going to go to a big school or you're going to go to a small school. If you're going to go to college, you're going to go to big school, you're going to go to Illinois. So I don't even remember visiting the school, actually, even though it was 30 miles away, until I went to college. That wasn't a thing. You didn't do that. The thing I fell into at Illinois that probably set me on my path was Star Course, which at the time, if you know what that is, Star Course organizes concerts. At the time, Star Course had access, it might still today, I don't know, to every venue on campus. So I could do a show in the football stadium. We did the first Live Aid there, which was one of the first big festival concerts to raise money for farmers. We had basketball stadium, we had Follinger, we had Cranner, we had all kinds of different venues. So I got to work with an extraordinary, diverse range of talent. And I ultimately became the leader of Star Course, so I got to pick the talent, which was super, super cool. I worked at the radio station, and I was just really jazzed about bringing all kinds of stuff to town and figuring out how we were going to engage not only the students, but the city, the population, into all of this incredible music that we could kind of, we could get access to, because they were coming through anyway on their way to Chicago, and I could often convince them to come to Champaign. That I think aligned me with the point of view of artists and creators. And that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to spend my life with artists and creators. And I guess to use a term we use at Amazon, if I were to follow my superpowers, we talk about that at Amazon. I don't think I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, nor did I just knew that I liked writing, I liked reading. I found out when I was doing Star Course that I liked negotiating, I liked deals, I liked building and planning, and I liked being a student, and I liked learning. And that led me to, I'll stay in school. That led me to law school. That fed my curiosity, because I realized as a lawyer, I could do anything that was interesting to me. I could do entertainment, which I do, but I've done many other kinds of things over the years too, unrelated to entertainment, using the fundamental skills of law. But if you're interested in the environment, I've done things in real estate, social justice, pro bono work, all kinds of different work over the years, because it's interesting and I'm curious about it. And that foundation was there for me as someone who had gone to law school. So that's my path through Illinois. And I felt like it set me up so well, not only because of the education, but as importantly, the many things that were available to us on campus, so many activities. So for a curious person, it was a great place to be. And, we went to school with sort of lovely, modest Midwesterners, which I appreciated and still do quite appreciate.
Yeah. That's awesome to hear, kind of the origin story, the background, some of the context, and even like at a young age, how diverse kind of the set of people and experiences and the cast of characters was to, make you who you are today. And that leaning into learning and always being curious and being like the eternal student is something that I think a lot of folks on the call resonate with. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand the popcorn over to Greg for the same thing. Like, how did you kind of find your way from where you grew up to U of I, and then how did that feed into what you find yourself doing today?
Sure. Well, I grew up on a farm, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, close to a small town called Fisher, Illinois, which is about 25 miles north and a little bit to the west of Champaign-Urbana. And growing up on a farm, dairy farm, so out helping my father milk cows. My oldest brother and my father were super interested in ham radio. And as soon as I was able to, they would encourage me to get a little piece of metal and drill a hole in it, or get a couple wires and solder them together. And, after I burned myself a few times, I kind of figured out which end was hot and which end wasn't. So you kind of learn by doing. A lot of hands-on building things and just growing. When I went to a small high school, I think there were around 40 kids that graduated, decided I wanted to go to college, kind of had to pick a major at some point. I was really super interested in music, super interested in, or curious about engineering. I wasn't sure what engineering was, but I thought it might be something I could be pretty good at. So I was thinking like music, engineering. I realized I wasn't a very good musician, but I was pretty good with math. So I decided I would go to engineering school. My older brother drugged me to engineering open house one year. And basically at that point I was hooked. I could build things. They were giving some cool demos, and I thought that looks like a lot of fun. Maybe I can do something like that. I eventually wound up at the University of Illinois. My college background, my high school background wasn't very strong. So I had to retake a few classes. So I don't know if any of you wound up in a situation where you really weren't quite ready for calculus or chemistry or some of those classes. So I had to retake some of those classes and kind of start over again just a little bit. But Illinois was super friendly, helped me find my way, and graduated both a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree in electrical engineering. I've kept in touch with the school somewhat, and super excited about the ECE program, which I think combines hardware issues and software issues, which are super important for modern engineers who are building modern systems. So that's just a little bit. Grew up on a dairy farm, milking cows. Coming down to Champaign-Urbana was a big deal. That was the big town. We came down once in a while, but not very often. And I had to pinch myself when I was actually taking classes at the University of Illinois. Super excited to graduate from there. And it's all that hard work has served me well.
Yeah, so you've been like an engineer's engineer for a long time, like helping and leading teams of people that have like deployed so many different things that we saw in the video out into the real world. And I don't know what I would do as a dad without an Alexa in my house. Like my kids, they go and play nicely with each other. They dance. They do like all the things that parents want them to do without tearing the house up and without fighting each other. So for your contributions to peace in my my home, thank you. You did drop a reference to something that you've got a hand in, like a cool program that you've helped to launch at the U of I to help increase kind of access and opportunity and like on-ramp to kind of diverse engineers. You want to double click into that really quickly just to let folks know?
Sure. Well, one of the things that's important, I believe, in diversity and diversity in design is what am I going to do? When I first was interested in diversity, I kind of thought, well, there's a group somewhere at Amazon doing something with diversity, and I can't wait to hear what programs they're doing, but I'm kind of busy and I don't, what can I do anyway? So, but at some point I realized I need to take control and take some responsibility, and started thinking about, well, what could I do? On one of my trips to the University of Illinois, I was asking different professors and different people there about diversity in the student workplace and what were they seeing. And they introduced me to a program called Arise. I don't know if any of you students know about the Arise program, but it was a program that was specifically designed to appeal to students like myself who, I had a pretty good skills around math, but I really just didn't, my high school hadn't done a good job of preparing me for the rigors of engineering school. Engineering school is tough. I would guess probably all the schools at the University of Illinois are tough. So the Arise program was a special program that gave those kids an academic red shirt 1 year to prepare and get more well prepared for the rigors of a large school. And so I had the opportunity to work with the University of Illinois and convinced Amazon to put some money in. So for the last 5 years, Amazon's been putting some money in to help fund the Arise program. I've kept track with the kids who are in that program. And in fact, we were able to intern a fair number of kids who are in that program. And a lot of those kids, the diversity in that program is much higher than you might expect from the general University of Illinois population, but it does much more closely represent the population of the state of Illinois. So it's a broad diversity there. And for a lot of those kids, they may be the first one in their family to go to college. So it's super exciting to get to know the kids, sponsor the program, and I'm super proud of the work what Arise is doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, students, I just wanted to have you kind of hear about that. Maybe there's some name recognition or maybe not, but diversity efforts are still ongoing. And maybe for context for both Greg and KellyJo, if you wanted to put your major or your focus area in the chat so they can get a sense of like the diversity of things that you're studying and you're focusing on. And then I'll kick the next question over to you, KellyJo, that's about outside of work, kind of the things that you love to do, the things that help keep you balanced. We all have lived through kind of a crazy time this last couple of years. So how have you led as a lawyer and supported all these cool businesses, but then stayed sane and, kept your family together and, just kept a peace about your mind and your body during this last couple of years?
I have 3 kids, all college age, 1 engineering, 1 design, 1 to be TBD. I'm probably going to fall closer into her mom's footsteps, I'm guessing. So there's been a part of me that has welcomed the different pace and the chance for us to step back and rethink the way we approach how we live, candidly, leaving aside all of the incredible travails we've gone through as a society. On a personal level, that's meant a lot more quiet, something I've not had much in my life, and I'm filling it with different kinds of routines. So, for example, before I look at my phone in the morning, I look at poetry. I do some kind of spiritual reading of interest to me. Right now, some Buddhist work on loving kindness is the thing that's interesting me at the moment. And so I do something like that, put my head in a totally different space. That helps remind me that to have a more holistic point of view about my life, not look at my phone and think about work first thing in the morning. And I had kids home, some had to come home from college. So time with the kids listening to me work was super interesting. I mean, we learned a lot about each other during that time. One of the most important things that I focused on in the first year of COVID, there were two. One was mental health. And I devoted an extraordinary amount of my time at work on mental health initiatives. Amazon is very supportive of all of us kind of following our passions. So there's literally hundreds of interest groups that form by employees. You can start your own thing and you can invite people and you can program it. There's a lot you can do. And so there was a lot of need for mental health discussion. At first, people were worried about how they were going to work from home for 2 weeks. And it started with that. And then it became something entirely different. So that was really important. And I got a lot of support for that from Amazon and did some broadcast work to share with the people in my department, of which there are about 2,000 people in our legal department, on trauma, overwhelm, stress. And then the other thing I put a lot of energy into that year was election protection. And that meant the right for everyone to vote all over the country. And that was urgent, I would say, because that is work that happens at the poll. It is work that happens when you go to a place to register. So someone is calling in a moment often of stress because they can't get registered or they can't vote. And again, Amazon was super supportive of, I think maybe 90 of us in my department worked on that. And by worked on that, I mean, we put a lot of hours into it, but it felt like the right place to put my energy from inside of my house, both of those things, to connect with people at a very personal level, and then a societal level focused on access to voting for all people wherever you live in the United States. So that's, I guess, yeah, that's kind of how I get my balance. Otherwise, I read a lot. I'm lately watching a lot of movies and TV, just checking out the work we do at work. Listen to a lot of music. I should listen to more podcasts, but I'm tending to listen. I admit I use Alexa more for Audible, which is books. They have podcasts too, but lately I've been kind of into that, especially a series called Words and Music by well-known musicians talking about their lives and work. So I guess I engage with a lot of culture. And the other one last thing I like to do is just to explore. I told you I was a bit of free ranger, kind of an alley cat growing up. And I like to do the same thing. I like to go on field trips to neighborhoods where I haven't been, with no agenda, and just wander around and go inside places and eat and just see who lives there. Maybe they have restaurants, coffee shops, maybe they don't, but that's kind of what I like to do for my free time. Free range.
We have that should sound familiar to some students. We have them doing a project where they're interviewing some stakeholders in a group that they're particularly interested in from a social impact, design perspective. So a lot of that, getting yourself into an uncomfortable place to observe, to collect data, to empathize, to understand a problem or a challenge more deeply by immersion, is something that we focused a good bit of time on in the last 12 weeks. A follow-up question I did have, do you feel by virtue of your kids being closer to you during the pandemic that they want to be more like mom in their profession, or that they want to steer clear of the type of work that you're doing?
You know what I think that they learned during the pandemic, because they would often come by my work office, my home office, and go, "What do you do again? I thought you were a lawyer." So what they learned was that they heard me like having conversations about mental health, about people's life, about, maybe work. It may be something that sounded like legal, but maybe it was like a business idea. We have those all the time. Like I have thoughts on what our music products are going to be, for example, or other things. So what they learned, I hope, and that I think that they really did take away, because they commented on it, was how to think about how you want to be in this world, how you want to interact with people, the importance of curiosity, the importance of authenticity, and really showing up. And like I talk with my son, my designer son, about it all the time. And the kinds of things you just mentioned, like how you pay attention so that you work backwards, using an Amazon term, working backwards from solving the problem, solving the real problem, and leaving personalities to the side, not ignoring people, but leaving personalities to the side so you can solve real human problem. So I hope they're going to think about what I do differently than they might have just thinking their mom was a lawyer.
Yeah. You often don't equate design and lawyer like in the same kind of universe, but to hear kind of what tactically you're doing and to get exposure by virtue of just being close to it is another kind of design aha. Like if you can get close to who you're designing for, you get different perspectives and you get different thoughts and you get different ideas about how to better serve. So yeah, for all the designers and maybe lawyers that are up and coming out there in the audience, you're getting a kind of front row seat to what it's been like. And I'll kick a similar question over to you, Greg. Like the way that you kind of thought about designing products and the fact that people were like remote and doing it from home and like in a different maybe mental or family or just a different state and space. Like how did you go about doing your job over the last couple of years and given these new design constraints or these new kind of things that were part of the equation?
Yeah, well, it's super, by the way, it's hard to compete with a meditating alley cat, but I'll give it a shot. It's super interesting. Your question is super interesting. And the thing I learned pretty quickly is you need to be flexible. Designing a new product involves so many different groups. If you break it down into little pieces, there's so many different buckets, and each one of those groups interact with each other and across the groups in different ways. And so being flexible was super important. A lot of the software engineers can put their headphones on and code and bang away and do great design work wherever they are. And I learned, we used to have a hard and fast rule. You sit in your office to do that. But for big chunks of the organization, I quickly learned doesn't matter. If people are motivated and interested and find the problem they're working on interesting, they'll work and solve those problems wherever they are. Now, on some aspects of design, where you're designing a shape or a color or a certain kind of material, you can do a little bit of that. You can do quite a bit of that on your own, but a lot of it really is interactive. And so when you have to do some integration testing, bringing together different elements and they have to bolt together in certain ways, we had to figure out ways where people could do that. We did as much simulation as we could. We did as much rendering as we could, so it was photorealistic. We have a couple animators on staff, so we developed little short movie sequences. But at the end of the day, you have two pieces of plastic that are supposed to snap together and bolt together. We needed to figure out a way that was safe for those people to be in the same room at the same time. Small groups, super extra heavy, deep cleaning, special masks. But those people, about 6 months in, we figured out, okay, we could be safe and accomplish. So we just had to be adaptive. And I think that's I think that's the big learning for me out of COVID has been adaptive. We're going to have a hybrid workplace. We're going to have a workplace where some people say, I really need time to spread out and have my regular life along with my work life. We need to figure out how to make that work. As employers, we need to figure out how to make that work. And I also need to listen to my employees. How can you be as efficient as possible, but also when it's time to integrate and get things working together to be part of a bigger system, how do we bring people together safely so they're empowered to build those bigger systems? You can't build a bridge one piece at a time. You can build parts, but sooner or later they have to all snap together. So we have to be flexible about that. And I think that's probably my biggest learning.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's fascinating. You talk kind of through some of the primitives of the design thinking process that we've touched on, like prototyping and the idea that something doesn't have to be perfect before you put it out there, and you pressure test it, and then you learn some stuff from it, and then you iterate, and then you try it again. So, you know, for the students, I mean, I see a bunch of different majors in here, from graphic design to, you know, poli-sci, and it's been cool to be able to share the design thinking process with such a diverse kind of range of students and community members, and have each of the different disciplines from a little bit of a different angle, kind of get something different out of it. And then also connect on their group projects to, you know, look at how would we solve poverty, or how would we solve climate change and sustainability, and like violence and hunger, and a bunch of these different things. So it's validation to hear you, KellyJo, and you, Gregg, like speak about kind of your process and how you've adapted and changed along some of the exact same themes that we've been able to talk about in the class. So that's super cool. Another prompt, again, if students, you have particular questions, I've got more, but if you've got more to ask about in the chat, feel free to. I want to pivot over to maybe a question about like futurism, and now that we've grappled with the fact that we can be productive, maybe in an alternative manner, that we're just seeing a bunch of new stuff and new opportunity by virtue of having stopped, taking a look around and seeing like, oh, we could not forced to do things the same. So KellyJo, like, what are some of the things that, as you look into the future, like you're really excited about or really curious about in terms of systems that we can do things differently in, or opportunities that exist now that did not necessarily previously?
I'll take off on Gregg's topic of flexibility. I think the flexibility that we have seen, or an adaptation maybe, and also that we're seeing, is really, it's an extraordinary moment. And I don't know, I can't predict where it's going to go, except that it's a moment where I think we can accelerate. I think we'll see acceleration at a pace we haven't seen before, with some, for a century at least, maybe for many ideas. I'm really interested. I found it really interesting to see how many even ideas started to emerge very quickly when it became clear people would be working away from the office, right? People trying to solve part of that problem, make that easier. As a society, we are getting comfortable with we're developing trust in a certain way, and it, maybe not as a society, on a personal level. Gregg just said, I trust that my people are going to get their jobs done. Like, Gregg knows his job is to help get them the tools and motivate them and create the environment for them to do their best work and come together in the right ways, right? So that feels like a very big thing that we can take advantage of. I'm really interested in taking sort of that flexibility and openness and figuring out how we go back to a world where we can talk to each other safely. And I'm going to give an example in law. In the last couple of weeks, there was a panel at Yale Law School a few weeks ago, with political speakers, and one of the panelists was from a far-right conservative organization, a woman. The organization is respected within its community. It has won 12 Supreme Court briefs. That's my example. And she was shouted off the stage before she said a word by the students of Yale Law School, by some students of Yale Law School. Eventually they were removed from the room, and then they proceeded to pound on the walls, pound on the doors from outside the meeting. I think back to when I went to law school, And, I went to Harvard Law School, and I'm this girl from Danville, and it was a big world out there. I'm in Boston, and it seemed like it might be an intimidating place, but it was incredibly, the diversity of background and point of view was so extraordinarily interesting. And I could tap into all of it. We could talk to each other safely. We argued. I remember a book being thrown across a classroom one time. That surprised me a little bit, but nonetheless, people argued, but we had a safe environment from which to kind of focus on a problem and teach each other and give each other a point of view. I think we just need it so desperately. And I think that design thinking is a different way of approaching that fundamental need we have right now as humans and as a society, given that we are learning to trust in other ways, and we are giving grace and we are giving flexibility. Why can't we speak to each other and focus on problems? And I think that different people who come from different disciplines and people who come even different, a different generation, I'm super interested in hearing a lot more from younger generations who are living with so much of the impact of the world that previous generations have created, and have really collaborative, interesting, novel ways to solve problems. We see that in social media. Leave aside the negatives of social media. What we see in it is some kind of need for connection, right? How do we make that a healthy place? But you see fundamental human needs. And so I think I'm really excited about the opportunity for designers, design thinkers in every facet to bring us back to conversation with each other and problem solving.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know, there's a lot of gems that you put inside of there. So for the students, if you've got follow-ups, feel free to keep them coming. But Greg, I want to ask you that same question, like the way that you look at the future and the things that you're excited about, being able to realize some of the shifts away from status quo into some new areas of opportunity. What are your thoughts in that same regard?
Well, I loved KellyJo's answer. I love you can't help but observe the challenges for civil discourse that we're having right now. It's a surprise to me. It feels like it kind of came out of the blue, and a great disappointment. Mm-hmm. That said, when I interview kids coming out of the Arise program, or really all of our interns when they come on board, it fills me with joy. It makes me feel hopeful again, because they bring new ideas and are anxious to have an impact on the world. And I want to, as I look into my crystal ball, I think there are thousands and thousands of great ideas that we haven't explored yet. Mm-hmm. There are so many new ways of thinking about design, so many, the impact of, in my world, at least the impact of artificial intelligence, machine learning. There are things beyond machine learning now. Certainly robotics. Those are kind of baby steps towards what I think is a longer term vision around how we interact with large amounts of data. We have a planet that is suffering right now. And I can switch to an electric car, but what does that mean in the grand scheme of everything that's happening? I believe that young people coming out of school today can take that long-term view and say, okay, we have all this data now. How are the new ways that we're going to crunch that data? How are we going to turn that information into programs that can help us recover the planet, help the planet heal, help our resources clean up? And I do think they bring a political will that says, okay, I know this other stuff's going on. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to provide leadership and help pull the rest of the world out of this into a better future.
Yeah, That's awesome to hear. And as you speak about like some of the social, like big things at the macro level that we have to deal with, I wonder if the students in the chat let Greg and KellyJo know what you've either worked on for project one, like the social impact thing that you chose to focus on, or the one that you're doing your interviews about right now. Just put it into the chat so they've got some like context on the things that you're personally like working on over the last several weeks in order to make a mark in. And then while they're doing that, I know Bert raised his hand and had a couple of questions. So Bert, I'll pass the popcorn over to you for the next couple.
Thanks, Brandon. And of course, students and guests, if you have your own questions, please put them in the chat. We want to prioritize those as much as we can. I have a specific question for each of you, and also a third question that I think applies to both of you. But of course, if others chat in, we'll put those aside. My first question is for Kelly, and it's around the difference between compliance and care. I am making some assumptions about like where you might stand on this, but I'm wondering if you could explain to us the difference between compliance and care, and also how you deal with organizations or people that don't really understand the difference.
What a beautiful and hard question. Compliance and care. I'm gonna say one general thing, and I'm using the word compliant a little bit in a legalistic framework. The law and policy is behind the times. It follows. This keys back into what Greg said about your opportunity as designers, and as I look at your incredible projects, and they don't surprise me a bit, and that you're tying climate change and mental health, and you're tying those together. Absolutely right on. How can that not be, right? And healthcare systems. But the law will follow society. The law will follow innovation. So we should not be too discouraged by what is happening in that realm. We will follow you, right? We will follow change makers. We will follow designers. And so I think when you think about designing systems of compliance, because compliance is often systemic, ideally we are developing first with from a point of view of empathy. To be able to have empathy, you have to have conversation. You have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? You have to at least be willing to try to understand, even if you might make different choices. So in an ideal world, there's enough empathy so that when we develop systems of compliance, they come from a place of care, right? If they don't come from a place of care and we lose the human element and we lose humanistic qualities, eventually it will collapse, it will fail. I guess to that extent, I think if I had to choose, like on a scale, I think care is more important in a certain way than compliant as a framework, because I think the applied appropriately, care will lead us into systems with which we can more fairly comply, or we can accept the logic and rationale of compliance because we have more say in creating that system. If we don't pay enough attention to that, we will end up with systems which we all want to rail against and we refuse to comply with, right? So it's super important that we get involved and get care into that system before, so that it's a level of compliance we can support and tolerate.
I love that answer. And so like in my experience, I've met people that confuse the two and think that by being compliant, therefore they care. In my view, it's not the same. And I'm wondering if like that's also in your view, and like how you work with those people or organizations when that's their viewpoint.
Well, I'm trying to imagine that situation. I think I can imagine where someone would equate those two or think that compliance demonstrates care. I go back to this point of what is it that we're really trying to accomplish? What are we working backwards from? What are the problems we are trying to solve? And help me understand how you feel about it. How do you relate to it? How does it impact you? What are your personal experiences in this system? So that I can think more broadly about the system and my impact on that system. And then together we can think about how we create the right kind of systems that reflect your need to be compliant, to demonstrate your care, but also give you power, empower you to create systems and structures that merit that level of compliance. I hope that doesn't sound too kind of ephemeral, but
Yeah, I want to hop in real quick that as you're talking about that, something that I just came from New York City and came back from there to the Bay Area like yesterday. But I remember a while ago they had like a stop and frisk rule where a lot of people were, able to be kind of interrupted in their going from point A to point B. And the idea that laws could be created that haven't had the care built in that you talk about, KellyJo, and kind of the imbalance that creates and kind of the tension that might accentuate between two sides, the one who's saying comply, 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 and then the ones who are like, well, if you didn't take my feedback into this in the first place, this doesn't make as much sense and it's not equitable and it's not fair. So I'm sure, everybody in the community might have separate takes on it, but that's one example that came into my mind as you were talking about it. And that's the idea that we didn't build the care into the policy or the law in the first place so that we're not getting the outcomes that we want when we implement.
indeed. How about masks, right? And so the conversation about masks became a conversation about freedom, which became policy and legalistic, not one about care. Those concepts got super confused in that 4-letter word mask. Got super confused.
Yeah. Sorry to jump in on you, Bert. I know you got one for Greg after this one, but I love this conversation that we're having.
Yeah, we call it conversation for a reason, right? My question for Greg is, as someone who works on the product side, it's in the name, right? You're called to produce. Your job is to produce. There are people that are higher up than you that have these demands that say, by this certain time or within this time frame, I need you to produce X, like the next great product or whatever. And I guess my question is there any reason for you from your position to ever push back against releasing something by a certain time or saying no to things? And so like what might those reasons be, and how do you go about navigating that in the organizational political landscape?
Yeah, you do have to push back. As a designer, there are days when you just have to say, I'm going to push back. What I've learned over the years is product families have a natural arc. So if you think about a tablet today, it's kind of predictable. We know we want the next tablet to be lighter, thinner, have better battery life, faster graphics. That's kind of predictable. And lots of the supply chain is sort of built on top of that. And we know what's going on there. And those are, you might think of those as settlers. We know those teams are going to settle in and get on a regular heartbeat. Maybe some companies do twice a year, do spring launches and fall launches. And those are kind of mature product lines where you sort of know what's going on. There'll be breakout, you put cameras on the front, cameras on the back. There'll be breakout moments, but you'll get steady at that, and that becomes a little bit of a machine. Then there are, I would call them a V0 product, or an explorer might say, hey, I want to break out. We've never had an affordable robot that people can afford in their homes. Let's design that. Or the first echo. You can imagine the first time we said, we're going to have a device in your house, you can talk to it. You know, it's a bad day when you go into work and your boss's boss says, I want to talk to you. That's just like, oh my. You know, you get that call one day, and here's my first advice to the young students. If you get that call, you should say, yeah, I'm available, just in case it's not clear. So yeah, I'm available. Yeah, let's talk. And you drop everything you're doing, you have that conversation, and you know, we're going to build a device that you could just talk to it and it's going to give you an answer. And it's like, oh, okay. And you go back to your team and you're like, anybody have any ideas on how that could possibly work? And you start one by one, you start listing out the block diagram of what it would take to build a system like that. And you rough it out and you start building it. You start working on it, work towards that first prototype, you get going. But those V0 products are impossible to predict. You just don't know. In my world, when someone says this product's going to take about 2 years, that basically means we have no idea. And if it's a tablet and I say it's going to take 9 months, it might take 10, it might take 8, but we can have that argument. But on the first time you do it, the very first Echo, first Kindle, first robot, first Astro, if I tell you it's going to take 2 years, that's just a code word for, gee, boss, I have no idea. First Kindle took 3 years, first Echo took 3 years, first Astro took 4. And how do you decide? It's usually pretty easy. I put a device in somebody's house. I bring a device home, first of all, and play with it at home. And does it seem like it works well enough that I don't want to throw it out the window? You know, I have a lot of gadgets. I play with them. Is it competitive? Does it feel like it works well enough? Then, but before you say I'm going to ship it or propose to ship it, you give it to some beta customers. You let them, send them a set of instructions, ask them how they like it. And if you touch base with them a little while later, if they say, please come and take this thing away from my house, you know it's not ready yet. Or if you notice they haven't turned it on, or they turned it on for a few days and then turn it off and it's just collecting dust now, it's not ready yet. If you contact them and say, I want to take it home now, and they say, no way. No way, I'm keeping it. And then you know you're pretty close to ready. Then you can kind of button it up, get your legal approvals done, certifications, and then you can ship.
Yeah, that's awesome. So many different kind of pieces of insight in there in terms of like the process, and then kind of it seems like it takes commitment at the organizational level to give enough runway and like enough time for you to experiment. And we talked a little bit about experimentation and the ability to fail without, what did DeVar say in week 1? Like failure without judgment.
Right.
There's a lot of that's built into what they're talking about, and hopefully, you know, students are picking it up. But it's cool that we're hitting those same themes.
And communications. You know, my boss says he wants it. I said, well, let's build a schedule 2 years, and let's see how we're doing in 6 months. And I fully open with my boss, with whoever else is interested in, whoever's asking questions, and we'll show you where we're at in 6 months, and where did we predict we would be. And we can tell pretty quickly, yeah, this is going to converge, or it's like, oh wait, there's 101 other problems here. And in a company, it's perfectly, that's the best way to be successful. Stay open, transparent. And it's perfectly reasonable for a company, if you get a year into it, a year and a half into it, it's perfectly reasonable for a company to say, we're done investing, change direction, we're going to go a different direction. But more often than not, if you're doing something that's truly V0, hasn't been done before, you establish that vision with a strategy. And we can argue about the tactics, and we can argue about what's going to happen today, but you had a strategy, you had a long-term vision, you had a plan, And often on a V0, that vision doesn't run out because you want it done in 2 years and it takes 3. Usually that vision survives that longer term. It's taking a little longer. Are we on the right path? Is it worth squeezing out these last 10 bugs before we launch? Those are gut-wrenching conversations, but usually if you work on the vision, work on that first, the rest of it will follow along.
Yeah. I saw Arvin come up with the question. You want to come off mute, Arvin, and ask the one you put in the chat?
Definitely. Sorry for the background noise. I'm actually in Granger right now. So like one of the reasons I've like kind of asked this question throughout the semester is just like I'm aging out. I'm gonna graduate college soon, and I'm gonna start having to deal with like a lot of uncertainty. And I just wanted to know what advice you guys have for like entering different stages of your work in life. And I wanted to ask you guys for advice on how to like navigate the ambiguity that comes with that.
You want to go first, Greg?
Sure, I'll jump in. My advice is pretty straightforward. Number one, as you enter your first job, first of all, somebody can help you get that first job. If you get your first job, just build your skills. Just get good at your job. Understand what your job is and get good at it. And be aware that it might take a few years. And get good at your job. See yourself as a leader. People will look to you. You'll feel uncomfortable, but even in your first couple of years, think of yourself as leading. I'm still learning. I'm not arrogant, but I do bring some new skills from the university, and I'll put those out there and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And I think build those soft skills. Can you write a nice, coherent email that expresses your idea in a pleasant voice? And you may find out that in your first few years of working in the commercial world, you may find out your creative writing class is more important than your calculus class.
Yeah, same question over to you, KellyJo. I would imagine that graduate KellyJo is different than mom for the first time KellyJo.
You already know what mom KellyJo would say, because you talk to my boys sometimes, because I get this question about once a week, having 2 boys looking for jobs. So I totally agree with everything you said, Greg. And another way that I would summarize that too is patience. Patience, and as you find your job, it might take a little while, but patience. And patience as you're learning. Leadership is a way of being. It is not a position. It is a way of how you show up. And I think it's just so super important to take care of yourself. And I literally, my kids are in the same spot, and I see that. It's the one thing I keep like, take care of yourself. So like, keep the faith, take care of yourself. You will find your place. And I sort of think about following, like I said earlier, following your superpowers a little bit. Those things that make you feel some level of comfort and competence. Maybe you do some of that while you're looking for a job. Maybe you do it in a hobby or in some kind of volunteer work, something that keeps you engaged, where you keep using the things that make you feel good about yourself, because you got to take care of yourself while you're in this process.
Yeah.
And then you'll be great, right? Because like Greg and I would both tell you, like, you have no idea where your career is going to go. You just keep marching along and you do well and you learn, you'll have all kinds of options in your life. You're from a fantastic school, and you're going to have so many choices. So it's like one step at a time, and just be yourself and try to do your best at each step.
Yeah, we have a saying at Amazon about like, work hard, have fun, make history. Like I would just add, have a little bit of fun there too, because the last 2 years haven't shown us anything. We need to smile a lot more. We need to exercise and take care of ourselves a lot more. And even this space, like to create a way for us to communicate across generations, across majors and disciplines, across state lines and all of that. It's super cool that the blue and the orange kind of brought all this together. All you need to share is one little common thing in order for all this to be possible. So yeah, I just put that on to Greg and Kelly Jo's comments. I would like to, let's see, we're getting close to time. So let's do a quick selfie. So I'm going to come off of like slide presentation mode. I'll fast forward one and just say thank you, so much for the convo. I think this was a great one. Probably the best one we've had so far. And I'm not just saying that because y'all are on. We touched some really, really cool topics. So
Greg and I planned that in advance. We've been practicing.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the share and I'll give like the 10-second warning if you're able to come off of non-video just to take a quick picture. We'll get y'all out of here in a few minutes. Let's see. Let's do the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Okay, everybody throw the smiles on. 3, 2, and 1. Here we go. All right, we got it. So, yeah, on behalf of, again, Siebel Center for Design, U of I, our student body and community, just wanted to say thank you to you both, Greg and Kelly Jo, and maybe just one last word of wisdom or kind of nugget to send them away on. If you've got one last thing that you want them to put in their back pocket as they move forward, whether they're getting ready to graduate like Arvin, or whether they're kind of in the middle or at the beginning of their journey. I'll leave it to you all to do that, and then we'll just close it down. So pass the popcorn one more time to Kelly Jo.
Be courageous, take chances, have faith.
Very cool. And then Greg from Palo Alto, Champaign.
Yeah, from Palo Alto. Be fearless. And I think my parents would want me to add stay in school.
Yeah. I've got questions, Greg, for you probably about milking cow. Like so many things I've got questions about since we live in such a digital time.
Oh yeah.
I got questions about the rural times from back in the day, but we'll talk about that after.
Yeah. We'll drive over to the Central Valley and I'll show you how to milk a cow. That'll be fun.
Okay, send photos, please. Because I really want to see that.
Yeah. Well, cool. This will conclude like another community conversation. Man, this was a good one. Thank you to the students in the community that joined. Thank you to Kelly, Joe, and Greg, Bert for the support. Wishing you all well. Have a happy Thursday and rest of the week and weekend, and we'll see everybody soon.
Thanks everybody for coming. Best of luck. Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.
See you, Greg.
Thank you all.
Bye, Kaja.
Bye.